A fierce storm leaves Lena Mitchell with unexpected trouble and an orphaned foal. As she nurses the fragile creature back to health, she discovers he belongs to Grant Parker, the wealthy rancher she's always resented. When Grant offers her a job training the foal, Lena must decide: accept his offer or risk losing the bond she's built. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The storm had come without warning, ripping through meadow. Creak like a vengeful spirit, rain pounded against the windows of Lena Mitchell's small farmhouse, while lightning split the sky in jagged bursts. She huddled under a threadbare quilt that had belonged to her grandmother, listening to the wind howl around the eaves of the roof. "Just hold together," she whispered, both to the house and to herself. At 28, Lena had spent her entire life on this small piece of land. After her parents' passing 3 years ago, keeping the family farm afloat had become her responsibility alone. Each month brought new bills, new problems, and fewer solutions. Morning came with eerie silence. The storm had moved on, leaving destruction in its wake. Lena pushed open her front door and gasped. One of the old oak trees had fallen across her. Driveway and shingles from the barn roof were scattered across the muddy yard. "Great, just great," she muttered, tightening the belt on her worn robe. She didn't have the money for repairs, but what choice did she have? This farm was all she had left. After changing into jeans and a flannel shirt, Lena trudged out to assess the damage. The vegetable garden her mother had lovingly tended was now a muddy mess. The chicken coop had held, thankfully, but the fence around the north pasture was damaged. "One thing at a time," she told herself, grabbing a hammer and some nails from the tool shed. 3 hours later, with the fence temporarily patched, Lena decided to check the wooded area that bordered her property. Sometimes fallen trees could be salvaged for firewood, and with winter coming, she'd need all she could get. The forest floor was slick with mud and fallen leaves. Lena picked her way carefully among the debris, marking trees she could come back for later. That's when she heard it. A weak, pitiful sound that stopped her in her tracks. "Hello?" she called out, turning in a circle. "Is someone there?" The sound came again, softer this time. Lena followed it to a small clearing, where the storm had uprooted several saplings. And there, curled up against the base of a large maple tree, was a newborn foal. "Oh my goodness," Lena breathed, approaching slowly. The foal was a beautiful chestnut color with a white blaze down its face, but it was trembling violently, its coat matted with mud and rainwater. It couldn't have been more than a day or two old. Lena scanned the area for the mother, but saw no sign of any other horses. "Where did you come from, little one?" she whispered, kneeling down. The foal tried to stand at her approach, but collapsed back to the ground, too weak to support itself, its eyes large and frightened, fixed on Lena with what seemed like a desperate plea. Without hesitation, Lena shrugged off her jacket and wrapped it around the shivering creature. "It's okay," she soothed. "I've got you now." She gently lifted. The foal, surprised at how light it was. It must not have nursed yet, which meant its chances of survival were slim. But Lena had grown up around animals. She knew what to do. "For you're coming home with me," she told the foal, cradling it against her chest as she made her way carefully back through the woods. By the time Lena reached her barn, her arms were burning with the effort of carrying the foal. She'd converted one of the horse stalls into a storage area years ago when they'd had to sell their last horse, but now she quickly cleared it out, making a soft bed of clean straw. "First things first," she murmured, gently placing the foal on the straw. "We need to get you warm and dry." With soft, gentle movements, Lena used old towels to dry the foal's coat, talking softly all the while. "You're safe now. I'm going to take care of you." The foal's eyes were starting to close. Lena knew she needed to act fast. She ran to the house and returned with a bottle of milk replacement formula she kept for orphaned lambs. It wasn't ideal for a foal, but it would have to do until she could get to the feed store in town. "Come on, sweetheart," she coaxed, holding the bottle to the foal's mouth. At first it turned away, but Lena was patient, dripping a little of the formula onto its lips. Finally, the foal began to suckle weakly. "That's it," Lena encouraged, a smile spreading across her tired face. "Good job." For the rest of the day and through the night, Lena stayed in the barn, feeding the foal every 2 hours. She fashioned a makeshift heater from an old lamp and brought extra blankets from the house. By morning, the foal's condition had improved slightly, enough that Lena felt she could make a quick trip into town for proper supplies. At Mason's Feed and Supply, Lena loaded her cart with Mare's milk replacer, electrolytes, and a new soft blanket. She couldn't really afford. "What's all this for?" asked Betty Mason, who'd known Lena since she was a child. "Found an orphaned foal after the storm," Lena explained, counting out the last of her cash. "No sign of the mother." Betty's eyes widened. "You should check with Parker Ranch. I heard they lost some horses in the storm. That big fancy fence of theirs couldn't stand up to Mother Nature." Lena's stomach tightened. Parker Ranch. Everyone in Meadow Creek knew about Grant Parker, the millionaire who'd bought up the largest ranch in the county 2 years ago. He bred expensive race horses and was known for his cold business approach and his good looks, according to the local gossip. "I doubt it's one of his," Lena said, shaking her head. "This foal was pretty far into the woods," Betty shrugged. "Just saying. He's offering rewards for any of his stock that were found. Could be good money for you." The thought of money made Lena hesitate. Her property taxes were due next month, and the farm's ancient tractor needed repairs she couldn't afford. But then, she thought of the foal's trusting eyes, the way it had begun to nuzzle her hand this morning. "I'll look into it," she said non-committally, gathering her purchases. "But first, I need to make sure this little one survives." Over the next 3 days, Lena barely slept. The foal, which she'd started calling Star because of the small white patch on its forehead that resembled a star, grew stronger with each feeding. By the 4th day, it was standing on wobbly legs, following Lena around the stall with curious eyes. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" Lena said, laughing as Star nuzzled her pocket, looking for treats. "Just like me." On the 5th day, as Lena was mucking out Star's stall, she heard the sound of tires on gravel. Visitors were rare at her remote farm. Wiping her hands on her jeans, she stepped out of the barn to see a sleek black truck pulling up in front of her house. A tall man in expensive-looking jeans and a button-down shirt stepped out, surveying the modest farmhouse with an unreadable expression. Even from a distance, Lena recognized Grant Parker. His dark hair was shorter than in the newspaper photos she'd seen, but there was no mistaking that confident stance. Her heart sank. Someone must have told him about the foal. "Can I help you?" she called out, approaching him with caution. Grant Parker turned, and Lena was struck by the intensity of his blue eyes. They assessed her quickly, taking in her muddy boots, worn jeans, and the smudge of dirt she knew was on her cheek. "I'm looking for Lena Mitchell," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. "That's me, Grant Parker." He extended a hand, which Lena shook briefly. His grip was firm, his palm calloused despite his obvious wealth. "I understand you found a foal after the storm." Lena crossed her arms. "News travels fast." "Small town," he replied with a slight shrug. "I lost 3 horses in that storm, including a pregnant mare ready to foal. I've been searching for them for days." There it was. Star wasn't hers to keep. Deep down, Lena had known this was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. "The foal is in the barn," she said, turning away so he wouldn't see the disappointment in her eyes. "I've been bottle feeding it. It was in pretty bad shape when I found it." Grant followed her to the barn, his presence filling the small space in a way that made Lena acutely aware of every cobweb and crack in the walls. She led him to Star's stall, where the foal was napping in the sunlight that streamed through the small window. At their entrance, Star lifted its head and struggled to its feet, trotting over to Lena with a soft whicker of greeting. "Well, hello there," Lena said softly, scratching behind the foal's ears. "Look who's come to see you." Grant stepped closer, his expression softening as he examined the foal. "That's Midnight Star's foal, all right. Same blaze down the face." He reached out a hand which Star sniffed cautiously before allowing a brief touch. "Male or female?" "Male," Lena answered. "He's doing much better now. The first night, I wasn't sure he'd make it." Grant nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "You did a good job with him." The unexpected compliment caught Lena off guard. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm offering a $5,000 reward for each of my horses that's found," Grant said, pulling out a checkbook from his back pocket. "I appreciate you taking care of him." Lena stared at the checkbook. $5,000 would solve so many of her problems. She could fix the roof, pay the taxes, maybe even get the tractor running again. But as Star nuzzled her hand, looking for the treats she usually kept in her pocket, something inside her rebelled at the idea of putting a price on the connection. They'd formed. This foal needed love, not money, she said quietly, stroking Star's neck. I didn't do it for a reward. Grant's eyebrows rose slightly, his pen pausing over the checkbook. Nevertheless, you should be compensated for your time and expenses. Lena shook her head. I did what anyone would do. Finding him was just luck. Not anyone would have stayed up all night bottle-feeding a foal that wasn't theirs, Grant pointed. Out. He studied her for a moment, seeming both puzzled and intrigued. Most people would have called animal control, or, at the very least, taken the reward without hesitation. Lena met his gaze steadily. I'm not most people, Mr. Parker. Clearly, he agreed, putting away the checkbook. His eyes traveled around the barn, taking in the patched roof and worn equipment. Your farm has seen better days. The blunt observation stung, but Lena lifted her chin. It's been a tough few years, but we're getting by. We? Me and the land, she clarified. It's been in my family for generations. Grant's expression was unreadable as he turned back to the foal, who was now attempting to chew on Lena's shirt. Sleeve. He seems attached to you. We've been through a lot together this week, Lena said, gently redirecting Star's attention to a rubber toy she'd found in the attic, a relic from when her family had kept horses. Grant was silent for a moment, watching the interaction. Then he said something that surprised her. I need someone to help train this foal, someone he trusts. He looked directly at Lena. Would you consider coming to work at Parker Ranch? You could continue caring for him there. Lena blinked in surprise. Work for you? With me, Grant corrected. I have excellent trainers, but this foal has bonded with you. It would be easier for him to transition if you were there. The offer was unexpected. Lena looked at Star, then back at Grant. I can't leave my farm. It would just be during the day, Grant clarified. I'd pay you well, better than whatever you're making now, I'd wager. That wouldn't be hard, Lena thought wryly. The farm barely broke even these days. Think about it, Grant added, when she didn't immediately respond. In the meantime, I'll send a trailer for the foal tomorrow morning. The thought of Star leaving so soon sent a pang through Lena's heart, but she nodded. He wasn't hers. He never had been. Can I at least say goodbye to him tomorrow? She asked. Something flickered in Grant's eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or a memory of his own. Of course, he said, his voice gentler than before. Be ready at 9. As they walked back to his truck, Grant paused, looking out over Lena's small farm with its overgrown fields and weathered buildings. This land has potential, he observed, with the right investment. Lena bristled, assuming he was about to make an offer to buy her out, just as he had with several other struggling farms in the area. It's not for sale. Grant's lips curved, into a slight smile. I wasn't offering to buy it, Ms. Mitchell, just making an observation. Lena felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. Sorry, it's just... People have been trying to get this land for years, and yet here you are, still holding. Grant's gaze was assessing again, but not unkind. That says something about you. Before Lena could respond, Grant extended his hand again. Think about my offer. The job, I mean. Star could use someone who cares about him as more than just an investment. The statement surprised her. It didn't match the cold, calculating image she'd formed. Have Grant Parker from local gossip. I'll think about it, she conceded, shaking his hand briefly. As Grant's truck disappeared down her driveway, Lena returned to the barn, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. Star greeted her with a soft whinny, pressing his velvety muzzle against her palm. What am I going to do? She whispered, burying her face in his warm neck. I was just starting to think you might be the one good thing to come out of that storm. That night, Lena tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The practical side of her knew that taking the job made sense. It would provide much-needed income and allow her to stay close to Star. But working at Parker Ranch would mean being around Grant Parker, a man who represented everything she distrusted. Wealth, power, and the treating of animals as mere commodities. Yet there had been moments today when he'd seemed different from his reputation. The gentleness with which he'd touched Star, the respect in his voice when he'd acknowledged her. Care of the foal. By morning, Lena had made her decision. She would take the job, at least temporarily. For Star's sake, and for the sake of her struggling farm, she would step into Grant Parker's world. What she didn't know was how completely that decision would change the course of her life. At precisely 9 o'clock, a gleaming horse trailer pulled into Lena's driveway. Grant stepped out of the truck dressed in riding boots and a light jacket despite the warm morning. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a Western lifestyle magazine. Lena thought, every inch the successful rancher. "Good morning," he called, approaching her with confident strides. "Have you thought about my offer?" Lena nodded, acutely aware of her faded jeans and simple t-shirt. "I'll do it. For Star." Something like approval flickered in Grant's blue eyes. "Good. You can start today if you'd like. Come back with us after we load the foal." "I need to secure things here first," Lena said. "But I could come by this afternoon." "Fair enough," Grant agreed. "Let's get Star loaded up then." Together they entered the barn, where Star greeted them with eager whickers, already looking stronger and more vibrant than he had just days ago. "Hey, buddy," Lena said softly, fighting back the lump in her throat. "Time for you to go to your real home." Grant watched her with the foal, his expression thoughtful. "You've done an amazing job with him," he commented as Star nuzzled Lena's shoulder. "Most orphaned foals don't bond this quickly." "He's special," Lena said simply, attaching a soft lead rope to the makeshift halter she'd fashioned for the foal. Leading Star out to the trailer was one of the hardest things Lena had ever done. Each step felt like a goodbye, even though she knew she'd see him again that very afternoon. Star seemed to sense her mood, staying close to her side rather than pulling at the lead as he sometimes did. At the trailer, Grant took over, his movements confident and practiced as he guided the foal up the ramp. Star balked at first, but Grant spoke to him in a low, steady voice, his hand firm but gentle on the foal's neck. "It's all right, boy," he murmured. "Just a short trip, and then you'll be home." Lena watched, surprised by Grant's patience. It contradicted everything she'd heard about how he ran his ranch, like a corporation rather than a home for living, breathing creatures. As Grant secured Star in the trailer, he glanced back at Lena. "Parker Ranch, 3 miles past the old Miller's Pond on County Road 8. Come around 1 o'clock if that works for you." Lena nodded, not trusting herself to speak, as she gave Star one last pat. Grant hesitated, then added, "He'll be fine, I promise. I've got the best veterinarian in the state coming to check him over as soon as we get back." The reassurance was unexpected, but welcome. "Thank you," Lena managed. As the trailer pulled away, Lena stood in her driveway, a strange emptiness settling over her. The barn would feel too quiet now without Star's soft nickering. Later that afternoon, Lena drove her old pickup truck through the imposing gates of Parker Ranch. The contrast between her small, struggling farm and this immaculate property couldn't have been more stark. Pristine white fences lined manicured pastures where sleek horses grazed. The main house, visible on a distant hill, looked more like a resort than a farmhouse. At the main stable complex, Lena parked beside a row of expensive vehicles and took a deep breath. "Just remember why you're here," she told herself. "For Star, not for him." A young woman in riding clothes approached as Lena stepped out of her truck. "Can I help you?" "I'm Lena Mitchell. Mr. Parker asked me to come by. I'm here about the foal that was found after the storm." Recognition dawned on the woman's face. "Oh, right, I'm Brooke, one of the trainers. Grant mentioned you'd be joining us." She extended a hand, which Lena shook. "The foals settled in nicely, thanks to you. Come on, I'll take you to them." Them. Brooke led Lena into a state-of-the-art stable, where the smell of clean hay and leather tack filled the air. They passed stall after stall of beautiful horses, each worth more than Lena's entire farm, she suspected. At the end of the row, they stopped at a larger stall with extra bedding. Inside, Star was curled up asleep, his small body nestled against the side of a larger horse, a beautiful chestnut mare who lifted her head at their approach. "Duchess!" Lena exclaimed in surprise. "She's alive," Brooke nodded. "Grant found her this morning, caught in some brush down by the creek. She was dehydrated and exhausted, but otherwise okay. The vet says she's well enough to nurse her foal again." Lena's heart swelled with joy at the sight of mother and baby reunited, but a small part of her ached with the realization that Star wouldn't need her anymore. "That's wonderful," she said, meaning it despite the twinge of sadness. "I was so worried about him having to be bottle-fed long-term." "Ms. Mitchell." Lena turned at the sound of Grant's voice. He stood in the stable doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. "Mr. Parker," she acknowledged. "I see you found Star's mother." Grant nodded, stepping closer. "Pure luck. One of my hands spotted her when we were checking fence damage." His eyes held hers. "But finding her doesn't change our arrangement. Star will still need training and Duchess will need special care after her ordeal. They both seem to respond well to you." Lena glanced back at the stall, where Star had awakened, and was now watching her with those big, trusting eyes. "I'd still like to help," she confirmed, "if you're sure you need me." "I am," Grant said with surprising firmness. "Brooke will show you around and get you acquainted with our routines." He checked his watch. "I have a conference call, but perhaps you could join me for dinner later to discuss the details of your position." The invitation caught Lena off guard. "Dinner? Just a business dinner," Grant clarified, his expression neutral. "At the main house. 7 o'clock?" Lena hesitated, then nodded. "All right, 7 o'clock." As Grant strode away, Brooke gave Lena a curious look. "He doesn't usually invite new staff to the main house for dinner," she commented. "You must have really impressed him." Lena shook her head, puzzled. "I just took care of a foal anyone would have helped." Brooke laughed softly. "Trust me, that's not just anything in Grant Parker's world. Come on, let me show you around before you head up to the big house." For the next 2 hours, Lena followed Brooke through the impressive facilities of Parker Ranch, trying not to gape at the Olympic-sized indoor riding arena, the hydrotherapy pool for injured horses, or the immaculate training grounds. By the time Lena returned to her truck to head home and change for dinner, her head was spinning with information and with questions about the enigmatic man who had built all this. Grant Parker was clearly not just the cold businessman she'd imagined. The care and thought that had gone into every aspect of his ranch spoke of someone who understood and respected horses. Yet his reputation in town painted a different picture entirely. As Lena drove back through the gates of Parker Ranch, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important about Grant Parker, something that might explain the contradiction between the man and his reputation. And despite her best intentions, she found herself curious to discover what that might be. Lena stared at her reflection in the small bathroom mirror, hardly recognizing herself. She'd spent the last hour trying on every decent outfit she owned, finally settling on a simple blue dress she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding 2 years ago. It wasn't fancy by any means, but it was the best she had. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, pulling her long brown hair into a neat ponytail. "It's just a business dinner." Yet as she drove back to Parker Ranch that evening, her stomach fluttered with nerves. The main house loomed even larger up close, a sprawling 2-story structure with wide windows and a wraparound porch. Lights glowed from within, warm and inviting despite the mansion's imposing size. Lena parked her pickup truck between a Mercedes and what looked like a brand new Range Rover, acutely aware of the rust spots on her vehicle's fenders. Taking a deep breath, she approached the front door and knocked. To her surprise, Grant Parker himself opened the door. He'd changed into dark slacks and a crisp blue button-down shirt that made his eyes seem even more intensely blue than she remembered. "Ms. Mitchell," he greeted her with a slight smile. "Right on time." "Call me Lena, please," she said, stepping inside. "Ms. Mitchell makes me feel like I'm in trouble with the principal." A brief chuckle escaped him. "Lena, then." "And I'm Grant." The interior of the house was just as impressive as the outside. High ceilings, hardwood floors, and tasteful Western-themed artwork on the walls. But what caught Lena's attention was how surprisingly comfortable it felt. She'd expected cold, sterile luxury. But the leather couches looked well used, and there were actual books on the bookshelves rather than just decorative objects. "Your home is beautiful," she commented, following Grant through a large living room. "Thank you, though I can't take much credit. The previous owners did most of the renovations. I just moved in and added some furniture." He led her onto a back patio, where a table was set for two. I thought we'd eat outside. The evenings are still warm enough. The patio overlooked rolling pastures where horses grazed in the golden evening light. Beyond them, the sun was beginning to set over distant hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "This view is incredible," Lena said softly. "It's why I bought the place," Grant admitted, pulling out a chair for her. "The land spoke to me." The simple statement surprised Lena. It was something she understood deeply, the connection to a piece of earth that felt like part of your soul. Grant poured 2 glasses of iced tea and sat across from her. A woman Lena hadn't noticed before appeared with 2 plates of grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and some kind of grain she didn't recognize. "Thank you, Martha," Grant said to the woman, who nodded and disappeared back into the house. "I hope you're not vegetarian," he added, turning back to Lena. She shook her head. "Far from it. This looks delicious." For a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. Lena was hungrier than she'd realized, having been too nervous to eat much. "Lunch? So," Grant said finally, setting down his fork. "Tell me about your farm. How long has your family owned it?" 6 generations, Lena replied with pride. "My great-great-great-grandfather homesteaded it in the 1870s. It's not much compared to this place, but it's special to me." 6 generations is impressive, Grant said, and he seemed to genuinely mean it. "Not many family farms survive that long." "We're barely surviving now," Lena admitted, then bit her lip. She hadn't meant to be so honest. Grant's eyebrows lifted slightly. "What's the main issue, if you don't mind my asking?" Lena hesitated, then sighed. "Everything? The tractor's ancient, the roof needs replacing, and the irrigation system is falling apart. After my parents died, I had to sell most of our livestock just to pay the medical bills and taxes." She looked down at her plate. "Sorry, you didn't invite me to dinner to hear my problems." "Actually, I find it interesting," Grant said, leaning back in his chair. "Most people around here won't talk to me about real issues. They either want something from me or they've already decided I'm the villain who's buying up all the local farms." Lena felt heat rise to her cheeks. Until yesterday, she'd been firmly in that second category. "Are you?" she asked boldly. "Buying up all the farms?" Grant's lips curved into a slight smile. "I've made offers on properties that were already failing. I've never forced anyone to sell. But once you own the land, you turn it into more of this." Lena gestured at the pristine pastures around them. "Not everyone wants that." "What I do," Grant said carefully, "is restore viability to land that was being mismanaged. I employ more people in this county than any other business. I pay fair wages and I invest in conservation practices that will keep this land healthy for generations to come." His voice had taken on a passionate edge that surprised Lena. This didn't sound like a man who only cared about profits. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I shouldn't judge what I don't understand." Grant's expression softened. "No apology needed. I'm used to it." He refilled their tea glasses. "Now, about your position here. I'd like you to work with Star and Duchess 4 days a week. Duchess is still recovering and Star needs gentle handling to develop properly." "What about your regular trainers?" Lena asked. "They're excellent with mature horses, but you have a special touch with Star. He trusts you." Grant leaned forward slightly. "I believe in putting the right person with the right horse. Star is special. He could be exceptional with the right start." The compliment warmed Lena more than it should have. "Thank you. I'd be happy to work with them." "Good. We'll start you at $25 an hour plus bonuses when Star reaches training milestones." Lena nearly choked on her tea. That was more than double what she'd made at any job before. "That's very generous," she managed. Grant waved a hand dismissively. "It's the standard rate for specialized training." He studied her for a moment. "May I ask you something personal?" Lena nodded, curious. "Why don't you sell the farm? You could buy something smaller, more manageable, without all the financial stress." The question stung, but Lena kept her voice steady. "Because it's not just land to me. It's my heritage, my home. Every tree, every field has a memory attached to it." She looked out at the sunset, gathering her thoughts. "My father taught me to ride in the north pasture. My mother's roses still bloom by the kitchen window. When I walk those fields, I feel connected to everyone who came before me." When she looked back at Grant, Something in his expression had changed, a softening around his eyes, a slight furrow in his brow. "I understand," he said quietly. "More than you might think." Before Lena could ask what he meant, Martha returned to clear their plates and bring dessert. Homemade apple pie with vanilla ice cream. "Martha's pies are famous in 3 counties, Grant said, the serious moment passing. "You're in for a treat." The pie was indeed amazing, and as they ate, their conversation shifted to lighter topics: favorite horses they'd known, funny stories from Lena's childhood on the farm, and Grant's experiences traveling to horse auctions around the country. By the time coffee was served, Lena was surprised to find herself relaxed and laughing at Grant's dry humor. The cold businessman she'd expected was nowhere to be found. Instead, Grant Parker was thoughtful, knowledgeable, and surprisingly easy to talk to. As the evening came to an end, Grant walked Lena to her truck. "Thank you for dinner," she said, fishing her keys from her purse, "and for the opportunity to keep working with Star." "Thank you for taking the job," Grant replied. "I'll see you tomorrow at 9, Lena nodded. "I'll be here." As she drove home under a sky full of stars, Lena couldn't help but feel that something had shifted in her world. The man she'd spent years resenting from afar had turned out to be not at all what she'd expected. The next morning arrived bright and clear. Lena finished her farm chores in record time, eager to get to Parker Ranch and see Star. As she pulled through the gates at 5 minutes to 9, she spotted Grant walking with an older man near the main stable. Grant waved her over. "Lena, I'd like you to meet Dr. Wilson. He's been checking on Duchess and Star." Dr. Wilson, a white-haired man with kind eyes and a weathered face, shook Lena's hand firmly. "So you're the angel who saved our little Star. Grant's told me how you found him." "I just did what needed doing," Lena said, embarrassed by the praise. "Well, thanks to you, both mother and baby are doing remarkably well." Dr. Wilson patted her shoulder. "I'll leave you two to it. Grant, call me if Duchess shows any signs of fever." As the veterinarian walked away, Grant turned to Lena. "Ready to see your patient?" "Absolutely," she smiled. Together, they walked to the spacious stall where Duchess and Star were housed. The foal perked up immediately when he saw Lena, trotting over to the gate with his ears pricked forward. "Well, hello there, handsome," Lena cooed, reaching over to stroke his soft neck. "Look at you, all perky and bright-eyed." Duchess watched from further back, her intelligent eyes assessing Lena carefully. "She's still a bit wary of strangers," Grant explained. "She had a rough time before we found her." "Poor girl," Lena murmured. She stayed by the gate, letting the mare observe her without pressure. "She's beautiful, thoroughbred." Grant nodded. "With a touch of Arabian a few generations back. She's one of my best broodmares, but she's got spirit. That's why I think Star has so much potential." Lena spent the morning getting reacquainted with Star and slowly earning Duchess's trust. By lunchtime, the mare was allowing Lena to approach and gently stroke her shoulder. "You have a way with them," Grant observed from where he leaned against the stall door watching. "They sense your patience. Horses can see right through you," Lena agreed. "You can't fake caring." Something flickered in Grant's eyes, a shadow of an emotion Lena couldn't quite identify. Before she could wonder about it, one of the stable hands called Grant away to deal with a delivery. "I'll be back later," he told Lena. "Make yourself at home. The break room has lunch if you're hungry." For the next 3 weeks, Lena settled into a routine. 4 days a week, she would arrive at Parker Ranch by 9, spend the day working with Star and Duchess, and return home by 5 to tend to her own farm. Star grew stronger every day, his personality developing into a playful, curious mixture of his mother's spirit and his own natural confidence. Duchess gradually accepted Lena as part of their small herd, eventually allowing her to handle Star freely and even to groom the mare herself. Grant often stopped by to check on their progress, sometimes spending an hour or more just watching Lena work. At first, his presence made her nervous, but as time went on, she came to enjoy their conversations about horses, training methods, and the land they both loved in different ways. "You should try taking Star into the small paddock tomorrow," Grant suggested one afternoon as they watched the foal frolic around his mother. "Let him explore a bit more space." "I was thinking the same thing," Lena agreed. "He's ready for more adventure." Grant smiled. and Lena found herself noticing how it transformed his normally serious face, creating crinkles around his eyes that softened his whole appearance. "What?" he asked, catching her stare. "Nothing," Lena said quickly, looking away. Just thinking about what else Star might be ready to try. The truth was, she'd been noticing a lot of things about Grant Parker lately. The way his voice softened when he spoke to the horses, how his hands were strong but always gentle, the fact that he knew the name of every employee on the ranch and asked about their families. It was becoming harder to reconcile this man with the cold-hearted businessman she'd heard about for years. One rainy Thursday, as Lena was finishing up for the day, Grant appeared at the stable doorway. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure," Lena replied, hanging up Star's grooming brushes. "What's up?" "I was wondering if you might be free tomorrow evening. There's a benefit dinner for the County Agricultural Preservation Fund. I usually attend alone, but..." He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I thought you might find it interesting. Many of the local farmers will be there." Lena blinked in surprise. "Are you asking me to go with you? Like as your date?" Grant's expression remained carefully neutral. "As my guest. Many of the attendees have been skeptical of my intentions in this community. Having someone like you there, someone who knows both worlds, might help bridge some gaps." "Oh," Lena tried to ignore the twinge of disappointment. "Of course it wasn't a date." "Well, when you put it that way, how can I refuse?" "Is that a yes?" Grant asked, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Yes," Lena nodded. "What time?" "I'll pick." "You up at 6? It's at the Riverside Hotel in town." He started to turn away, then paused. "Wear something nice, it's formal." As he walked away, Lena felt a flutter of panic. She didn't own formal clothes. Her blue dress from dinner was the nicest thing in her closet, and it definitely wasn't benefit dinner material. That evening she called the only person she knew who might help. "Sarah, it's Lena. I need a massive favor." Sarah Jackson had been Lena's best friend since kindergarten. Though their lives had taken different paths, Sarah was now a successful real estate agent in town, while Lena struggled. With the family farm, they had remained close. "Let me guess," Sarah said after Lena explained her dilemma. "You need a dress that says I'm sophisticated enough to be on Grant Parker's arm but not trying too hard." "It's not like that," Lena protested. "I'm just going as his guest to help. With community relations." Sarah's laugh came through the phone. "Honey, Grant Parker doesn't need help with community relations. If he invited you, it's because he wants you there." "That's ridiculous," Lena insisted, though her cheeks warmed at the thought. "He's my boss, that's all." "Uh-huh. Be at my place at noon tomorrow. I've got a few dresses that might work, and Jenny from the salon owes me a favor. She can do your hair." Despite her protests, Lena found herself at Sarah's house the next day, trying on dresses and allowing herself to be pampered in ways she'd forgotten existed. By 5:30, she barely recognized the woman in Sarah's full-length mirror. The dress Sarah had chosen was a deep emerald green that set off Lena's hazel eyes and made her skin glow. It was simple but elegant, with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt that reached just below her knees. Jenny had worked magic with Lena's hair, transforming her usual practical ponytail into soft waves that framed her face. "Grant Parker isn't going." "To know what hit him," Sarah declared, stepping back to admire her work. "Stop it," Lena laughed nervously. "This isn't about impressing Grant." But as his truck pulled up outside Sarah's house precisely at 6, Lena couldn't deny the butterflies in her stomach. Grant stepped out of the vehicle, wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit that made him look even taller and more handsome than usual. When Lena opened the door, his eyes widened slightly, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "You look beautiful," he finally said, his voice lower than normal. "Thank you," Lena replied, suddenly shy. "Sarah helped me find something appropriate." "It's perfect," Grant assured her, offering his arm as they walked to his truck. The drive to the hotel was filled with comfortable conversation about their day, Star's progress, and what to expect at the benefit. Grant briefed her on some of the key people who would be there: county commissioners, wealthy donors, and local agricultural leaders. "Just be yourself," he advised as they pulled up to the hotel. "That's who I want them to meet." The Riverside Hotel had been transformed for the evening. its usual rustic charm elevated with twinkling lights and elegant floral arrangements. As they entered the ballroom, Lena felt dozens of eyes turn their way. "That's Grant Parker," she heard someone whisper. "But who's the woman with him?" Grant's hand settled lightly at the small of her back, a reassuring presence as they navigated through the crowd. He introduced her to person after person, always adding, "Lena's family has farmed in the county for 6 generations. She's also training one of my most promising foals." The pride in his voice when he spoke about her work with Star made Lena stand a little taller each time. As the evening progressed, Lena found herself genuinely enjoying the conversations with local farmers and ranchers. Many knew her parents and expressed condolences for their passing. Others were curious about her work at Parker Ranch, clearly surprised by her positive experiences. "He's not what people say," she found herself telling old Mr. Jenkins, who'd been her father's friend. "He really cares about the land and the animals." Mr. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "And does he care about you too? Because the way he looks at you when you're not watching tells quite a story." Before Lena could respond to that startling statement, Grant appeared at her side. "Sorry to interrupt, but I was hoping you'd save a dance for me," he said, extending his hand. The small orchestra in the corner had begun playing a slow, romantic melody. Lena hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in Grant's. "I should warn you, I haven't danced in years," she admitted as he led her to the dance floor. "Just follow my lead," Grant said softly, drawing her into his arms with surprising grace. His hand was warm against hers, his other hand resting lightly at her waist as they began to move with the music. Lena had expected to feel awkward, but instead found herself relaxing into the gentle rhythm, following Grant's confident steps. "You're doing fine," he murmured, his breath warm against her hair. Lena looked up, finding his blue eyes watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. In that moment, the room around them seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them moving together in perfect harmony. "People are talking," she said quietly, "about why you brought me tonight." A slight smile curved Grant's lips. "People always talk. Does it bother you?" "I'm just not sure what to tell them," Lena admitted. "What is this, Grant? Why did you really ask me to come tonight?" The song ended and Grant's hand tightened slightly around hers. "Let's get some air," he suggested, leading her toward the terrace doors. Outside, the night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the dark sky above. They walked to the stone railing, where the soft gurgle of the river below provided a soothing backdrop. "I asked you to come tonight because I enjoy your company," Grant said after a moment. "Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like Grant Parker, the ruthless businessman or whatever label this town has given me. I just feel like myself." The honesty in his voice caught Lena off guard. "I've enjoyed being with you too," she admitted. "More than I expected to." Grant turned to face her, his expression serious. "When I came to your farm that day to collect Star, I thought I was just retrieving a valuable investment. I never expected to find someone like you. Someone who sees the world with such clarity and heart." Lena's breath caught in her throat as Grant stepped closer, his hand gently touching her cheek. "I know there are 1,000 reasons why this might be complicated," he continued, his voice low. "I'm your employer. Our worlds are very different, but I can't stop thinking about you, Lena." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable in a way she never would have expected from a man like Grant Parker. Before she could find words to respond, a commotion from inside the ballroom caught their attention. One of Grant's ranch hands, a young man named Tyler, was pushing through the crowd toward them, his face flushed with urgency. "Mr. Parker," he called out. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's an emergency at the ranch. It's Duchess. She's down and thrashing. Dr. Wilson is on his way, but he said to find you immediately." The color drained from Grant's face. "How's Star?" "Agitated, but physically fine. We've moved him to another stall for safety." Grant turned to Lena, conflict clear in his eyes. "Lena, Go," she said immediately, touching his arm. "I'm coming with you." Relief washed over his features. Without another word, they hurried through the ballroom, ignoring the curious stares and whispers that followed them. In Grant's truck, speeding toward the ranch, Lena's mind raced with possibilities. Duchess had seemed fine that morning, a little, Tired perhaps, but nothing alarming. Colic? She asked, naming one of the most common and dangerous conditions in horses. Grant's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Possibly. Or complications from her time lost in the storm. She was severely dehydrated when we found her. The worry in his voice touched something in Lena's heart. This wasn't a man who saw his horses as mere investments. This was someone who cared deeply. They arrived at the ranch to find the main stable in controlled chaos. Lights blazed and several ranch hands moved purposefully around the area. Dr. Wilson's truck was already parked outside. In Duchess's stall, the mare lay on her side, her beautiful coat dark with sweat. Her breathing was labored, and occasionally she would try to roll, only to be gently restrained by Dr. Wilson and two stable hands. "What's happening?" Grant demanded, kneeling beside the veterinarian. Dr. Wilson looked up, his face grave. "Kidney failure, I think. Likely damage from the dehydration during the storm, finally catching up with her." "Can you treat it?" Grant asked, his voice tight. "I'm trying, but—" Dr. Wilson shook his head slightly. "It's advanced, Grant. Very advanced." Lena stood at the stall door, her heart breaking at the sight of the beautiful mare's suffering. In the next stall, she could hear Star whinnying, desperately for his mother. "I'm going to check on Star," she whispered to Grant, who nodded without looking away from Duchess. The foal was indeed agitated, pacing the confines of his temporary stall, his ears pricked toward the sounds of his mother's distress. When he saw Lena, he rushed to her, pressing his small body against the gate. "Hey, sweet boy," she murmured, letting herself in and wrapping her arms around his neck. "I know you're scared. I'm here." For hours, Lena stayed with Star, keeping him calm while Grant and Dr. Wilson fought to save Duchess. Ranch hands came and went, bringing fresh water, medications, and updates that grew increasingly grim. Near midnight, Lena heard the stall door open behind her. She turned to find Grant standing there, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained and his face haggard with exhaustion and grief. She knew before he spoke. "Duchess is gone," he said, his voice hollow. "We couldn't save her." Lena rose to her feet, her heart aching for both the lost mare and the man before her. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, offering the only comfort she could. For a moment, Grant remained stiff in her embrace. Then, with a shuddering breath, his arms came around her, holding her tightly, as if she were a lifeline in a storm. "I'm so sorry," she whispered against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "She fought so hard to get back to her baby," Grant said, his voice rough with emotion. "She survived the storm, found shelter, held on until we found her, all to get back to Star." The depth of his pain surprised Lena. This wasn't just about losing a valuable broodmare. This was genuine grief for an animal he had cared for. Over Grant's shoulder, she saw Star watching them, his large eyes somehow understanding that something fundamental had changed. The foal would never again feel his mother's nurturing presence, never learn the things only she could teach him. "What will happen to Star now?" Lena asked softly, drawing back to look into Grant's face. Grant reached out to stroke the foal's soft muzzle. "He'll need extra care, special formula, more human contact." His eyes met Lena's. "He'll need you more than ever." The words were simple but weighted with meaning. In that moment, standing in a stable in the middle of the night, still wearing her borrowed evening dress, Lena felt a connection to Grant Parker that defied all her expectations. "I'll be here," she promised, not just to Star, but to the man watching her with such vulnerability in his eyes. "For as long as he needs me." What neither of them said, but both felt hanging in the air between them, was the growing truth that it wasn't just Star who was forming attachments that would be difficult to break. As dawn broke over Parker Ranch, casting long shadows across the dewy pastures, Lena finally sat on a hay bale outside Star's stall, exhaustion overtaking her. Grant settled beside her, their shoulders touching in comfortable silence. "You should go home and get some sleep," he said eventually. "You've been up all night." Lena shook her head. "Star needs consistency right now. I'll stay a little longer. Make sure he eats." Grant's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with her own in a gesture that felt both new and somehow familiar. "Thank you," he said simply. And in those two words, Lena heard everything he wasn't saying, his gratitude for her help with Star, his appreciation for her presence during Duchess's final hours, and perhaps something more that neither of them were ready to name. What had begun as a simple act of kindness, saving an abandoned foal after a storm, had become something far more complex and meaningful. As the morning sun continued to rise, warming their tired bodies, Lena wondered what would grow from this unexpected connection between two people from such different worlds. Whatever it was, she knew it had already taken root, as surely as the ancient oaks that had weathered countless storms on her family's land. The weeks following Duchess's death brought a new rhythm to Lena's life. Star needed more care than ever, and she found herself spending more and more time at Parker Ranch. What had started as 4 days a week quickly became 6, with Lena arriving early and staying late to ensure the orphaned foal thrived despite his loss. "You're spoiling him," Grant commented one morning, leaning against the stall door. As Lena hand-fed Star Special supplements mixed with apple pieces, "He deserves a little spoiling after what he's been through," Lena replied, smiling as the foal nudged her pocket for more treats. "Besides, you're one to talk. I saw you sneaking him carrots yesterday." Grant's laugh was warm and genuine, a sound that had become more frequent in recent days. Guilty as charged. The easy companionship that had developed between them felt as natural as breathing. After the night of Duchess's death, something had shifted in their relationship. The careful distance Grant had maintained began to dissolve, replaced by a growing closeness that both excited and frightened Lena. They hadn't spoken about the moment on the terrace, Grant's near confession interrupted by the emergency, but Lena often caught him watching her with an intensity that made her heart race, and she found herself thinking about him at odd moments throughout her days. "I was thinking," Grant said, breaking into her thoughts. "Star is ready for some basic Helter training. Would you like to try the round pen today?" Lena brightened at the suggestion. "That's a great idea. He needs to start learning boundaries, especially now that he doesn't have Duchess to guide him." Together, they led Star to the small round training pen behind the main stable. The foal pranced alongside them, all gangly legs and boundless curiosity. "He's growing so fast," Lena marveled, watching Star investigate his new surroundings. "It's hard to believe he's the same fragile creature I found in the woods." "You've done an amazing job with him," Grant said, his eyes on Lena rather than the foal. "He trusts you completely." Something in his voice made Lena look up. Grant stood closer than she'd realized, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, the slight stubble on his jaw from a morning without shaving. "It's easy to care for someone who needs you," she said quietly, not entirely sure they were still talking about Star. Grant's hand reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face in a touch so gentle it made her breath catch. "Lena, well, isn't this cozy?" The cold female voice cut through the moment like a knife. Lena stepped back quickly, turning to see a tall, elegant blonde woman standing at the gate of the round pen. She wore riding clothes that probably cost more than Lena's monthly income, and her expression was one of calculated amusement. "Vanessa," Grant said, his voice suddenly formal. "I didn't know you were coming by today." "Clearly," the woman, Vanessa, replied, her gaze sweeping over Lena with barely disguised disdain. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your stable girl?" Lena felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and a touch of anger at the dismissive tone. "This is Lena Mitchell," Grant said, his jaw tight. "She's Star's trainer and a valued member of my team. Lena, this is Vanessa Blackwell." His fiancée, Vanessa added with a sharp smile, extending a manicured hand toward Lena. "How lovely to meet you, fiancée." The word hit Lena like a physical blow. She somehow managed to shake Vanessa's hand, hoping her shock didn't show on her face. "Nice to meet you too," she mumbled. "Vanessa," Grant said, his voice holding a warning note. "You and I both know that's not true." Vanessa's laugh was like tinkling glass. "Oh, Grant, don't be so serious. Ex-fiancé then, though Daddy still has hopes we'll reconcile. Speaking of which, he sent me to remind you about the Henderson merger meeting tomorrow. You haven't been returning his calls." Grant's expression had closed off entirely, returning to the cool businessman Lena had first expected him to be. "I've been busy." "So I see," Vanessa replied, her gaze flicking meaningfully between Grant and Lena. "Anyway, don't worry. I told Daddy you've just been distracted by your little hobby farm. He understands." The condescension in her voice made Lena bristle, but before she could respond, Grant stepped forward. "I'll walk you to your car, Vanessa," he said firmly. "Lena, would you mind staying with Star for a few minutes?" Without waiting for her answer, Grant escorted Vanessa away, his hand at her elbow guiding her, firmly toward the parking area. Lena watched them go, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Fiancé. Ex-fiancé. Whatever Vanessa was, she clearly belonged in Grant's world in a way Lena never would. The elegant clothes, the casual mention of business mergers and daddy, everything about Vanessa screamed wealth and privilege. What am I doing here? Lena whispered to herself, suddenly feeling out of place in her worn jeans and work boots. Star nudged her arm, sensing her distress. Lena stroked his neck absently, her mind spinning with questions she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. Who was Grant Parker, really? What did she actually know about his life beyond this ranch? Star whinnied softly, drawing her attention back to the present. Whatever was happening between her and Grant, whatever might have been about to happen before Vanessa's interruption, Lena still had a job to do. Star needed her, even if she now doubted whether Grant did. By the time Grant returned 15 minutes later, Lena had composed herself. She was working with Star on basic halter commands, her voice steady despite the tumult in her heart. "I'm sorry about that," Grant said, entering the round pen. "Vanessa has a talent for dramatic timing." "It's fine," Lena replied, not meeting his eyes. "She seems interesting." Grant sighed. "Vanessa and I dated briefly last year. We were never engaged, despite what her father might wish. Our families have known each other for years, and there was some business advantage to the relationship, but..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "It was a mistake." "You don't owe me an explanation," Lena said quickly, though relief washed through her at his words. "Yes, I do," Grant insisted, coming closer, because what I was about to say before she arrived was important. Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Grant." The shrill ring of his phone interrupted her. Grant muttered something under his breath as he pulled it from his pocket, glancing at the screen. "I have to take this," he said apologetically. "It's the vet about one of the other mares. Can we talk later, maybe dinner tonight?" Lena nodded, watching as he walked away, already speaking into the phone. That evening, Lena drove home to change. Before dinner, her emotions swinging between hope and doubt. Part of her wanted to cancel, to protect herself from whatever complications might come from getting closer to Grant Parker. But a stronger part couldn't deny the connection she felt to him, a connection that had grown from their shared care of Star into something far more meaningful. As she approached her farmhouse, Lena noticed an unfamiliar car parked in her driveway, an expensive black sedan that seemed out of place against the weathered buildings. A man in a suit stood on her porch, consulting something on his phone. "Can I help you?" Lena called as she climbed out of her truck. The man looked up, his expression businesslike. "Ms. Mitchell, my name is Edward Blackwell." He extended his hand. "I was hoping we could chat." Blackwell. The name registered immediately. "You're Vanessa's father." "I am," he confirmed with a tight smile. "And the CEO of Blackwell Development Corporation. May we speak inside?" Confused but cautious, Lena led him into her small living room, suddenly aware of the peeling wallpaper and worn furniture through the eyes of someone like Edward Blackwell. "What can I do for you, Mr. Blackwell?" she asked, remaining standing as he settled uninvited onto her couch. "I'll be direct, Ms. Mitchell," Blackwell said, his tone pleasant but with an underlying hardness. "I understand you've become close to Grant Parker." Lena crossed her arms. "I work for Mr. Parker." "Of course." Blackwell nodded, not believing her for a second. "Nevertheless, I thought it might be helpful for you to understand the situation fully." "What situation would that be?" Blackwell adjusted his expensive tie. "Grant Parker is poised to become one of the most influential businessmen in the state. My company and his have mutual interests that extend far beyond this little county. A merger between our families, through my daughter, would solidify those interests." Lena felt a chill at his calculated words. "And what does this have to do with me?" "Let me be blunt," Blackwell said, his pleasant facade dropping slightly. Grant has been distracted lately. He's missed meetings, delayed decisions. My sources tell me he spends an unusual amount of time here at the local ranch, time that coincides with your employment. Are you monitoring Mr. Parker's schedule? Lena asked incredulously. Blackwell waved a dismissive hand. Business requires information. The point is, whatever friendship has developed between you and Grant, it can only be temporary. Your worlds are simply too different. Anger flared in Lena's chest. I think you should leave, Mr. Blackwell. He ignored her, reaching into his suit jacket to withdraw an envelope. Before you dismiss me, I have a proposal that might interest you. He placed the envelope on her coffee table. Your farm is struggling, financially. The county assessor's records show you're behind on property taxes, and the bank holds a substantial lien on your property. The fact that he'd investigated her finances sent a wave of humiliation and fury through Lena. That's none of your business. On the contrary, Blackwell continued smoothly, I'm making it my business. In that envelope is a check for $200,000, enough to clear your debts and make necessary repairs to your farm. Lena stared at the envelope, momentarily speechless. And what would I have to do for this generous gift? Nothing. Complicated, Blackwell replied with a thin smile. Simply distance yourself from Grant Parker, complete whatever contract you have for training the foal, but decline any further involvement with him or his business. The audacity of the offer left Lena breathless with anger. Let me get this straight. You're offering to buy me off so your daughter can have a clear path to Grant. I'm offering you financial security in exchange for stepping away from a situation that can only end badly for you, Blackwell corrected. Do you really think a man like Grant Parker has long-term intentions towards someone like you? The cruel question hit its mark, touching Lena's deepest insecurities. She'd asked herself the same thing after meeting Vanessa. What could someone like Grant possibly see in a struggling farm girl with dirt under her fingernails? But then she remembered the way Grant looked at her when they worked with Star together. The genuine connection they'd formed over shared values and mutual respect. Whatever was growing between them, it wasn't something that could be bought or sold. Mr. Blackwell, Lena said, drawing herself up to her full height, I want you to take your check and get off my property. Now. Blackwell's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Ms. Mitchell. I can be a powerful friend or a dangerous enemy, your choice. I think I've made my choice clear, Lena replied, walking to the door and holding it open. Goodbye, Mr. Blackwell. After he left, Lena stood in her living room, shaking with anger and a strange sense of resolution. Whatever doubts Vanessa's appearance had created, Edward Blackwell's visit had washed them away. She wouldn't let someone like him dictate her relationships or her future. With newfound determination, Lena changed for dinner with Grant, choosing the green dress Sarah had lent her for the benefit. Tonight, she decided, she would be honest about her feelings, whatever the consequences might be. But when she arrived at the main house of Parker Ranch, she found Grant pacing on the front porch, his expression troubled. What's wrong? She asked immediately, sensing his agitation. Edward Blackwell called me, Grant said, his voice tight with controlled anger. He said he visited you today. Lena's heart sank. He did. Why didn't you call me? Grant asked, his hands clenching at his sides. He had no right to approach you. Like that. I can handle people like Edward Blackwell, Lena assured him, though she appreciated his concern. But I'm curious, what did he tell you about our conversation? Grant's jaw tightened. He said he'd made you an offer to step aside and that you'd responded emotionally. He suggested I look elsewhere for Star's trainer, someone more stable. A disbelieving laugh escaped Lena. Stable? That's rich. And did he mention how much my emotions are worth to him? $200,000 apparently. He offered you money. Grant's voice was dangerously quiet. To stay away from you? Yes, Lena confirmed. He seems very invested in your relationship with his daughter. A relationship that doesn't exist, Grant ground out, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm sorry, Lena. I never thought he'd go this far. Why does he care so much about who you date? Lena asked, genuinely confused. Grant sighed, gesturing for her to sit with him on the porch swing. It's complicated. Blackwell Development wants to acquire several properties in this county. For a massive resort development, they need my support because I own key parcels of land they can't build without. And he thinks if you marry Vanessa, you'll just hand over your land. Lena asked incredulously. Or at least sell it at a favorable price, Grant confirmed. Edward Blackwell is used to getting what he wants, and he's decided a union between our families is the most efficient way to get my cooperation. That's cold, Lena said, shaking her head. That's business at his level, Grant replied grimly. But involving you crosses a line. I'll make that very clear to him. Lena placed a hand on his arm. Don't worry about me. I told him exactly what he could do with his money. A smile finally broke through Grant's anger. I bet you did. His expression softened as he looked at her. You look beautiful tonight, by the way. Thank you, Lena said, suddenly shy under his appreciative gaze. I thought the occasion called for something special. Grant's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. Lena, about what I was trying to say earlier before Vanessa interrupted. The front door opened, spilling light onto the porch as Martha, Grant's housekeeper, appeared. Mr. Parker, she said apologetically, there's an urgent call from the Henderson Group. They say it can't wait. Grant closed his eyes briefly in frustration. Tell them I'll call back in 10 minutes. They insisted it's an emergency regarding the contract, Martha pressed. Something about a deadline tonight. With a heavy sigh, Grant stood. I'm sorry, Lena, I need to take this. It should only take a few minutes. Of course, she nodded, though disappointment pooled in her stomach. Business comes first. He hesitated, looking torn. No, it doesn't, he said firmly. Not always. Wait for me? I'll be here, Lena promised. While Grant was inside taking his call, Lena wandered to the edge of the porch, looking out over the ranch that had become such an important part of her life. The moon was rising, casting silver light over the pastures where horses grazed peacefully. It was a beautiful place, a testament to Grant's vision and hard work. She could understand why the Blackwells wanted a piece of it, though their methods disgusted her. A movement near the stable caught her eye. Someone was walking quickly across the yard, heading toward the parking area. Even in the moonlight, Lena recognized the elegant figure of Vanessa Blackwell. What was she doing here? And why was she leaving so furtively? A sense of unease crept over Lena. Following her instinct, she hurried down the porch steps and toward the stables, driven by a feeling that something wasn't right. The main stable was quiet, most of the horses already settled for the night. Lena moved quickly to Star's stall, relief washing over her when she saw the foal resting peacefully. But as she turned to leave, she noticed something on the floor outside the neighboring stall, a syringe. Alarmed, Lena picked it up carefully. It was empty, but a few drops of clear liquid remained at the tip. The stall it lay outside of housed Grace, one of Grant's most valuable broodmares, currently in the late stages of pregnancy. Lena moved to the stall door, her heart pounding. Inside, Grace stood with her head hanging unusually low, her breathing labored. As Lena watched in horror, the mare's legs began to tremble. "Grace," Lena called softly, letting herself into the stall. The mare's eyes rolled toward her, showing too much white, a sign of distress. Without hesitation, Lena pulled out her phone and called Dr. Wilson's emergency number, then texted Grant, "Come to the stables now. Emergency with Grace. Dr. Wilson on his way." By the time Grant arrived, Grace had collapsed onto the straw, her sides heaving with labored breaths. Lena was kneeling beside her, monitoring her pulse and keeping her calm. "What happened?" Grant demanded, dropping to his knees beside Lena. "I don't know for sure," Lena said, showing him the syringe. "But I found this outside her stall and I saw Vanessa leaving the stables just before I came to check." Grant's face darkened with fury. "Are you saying Vanessa did this?" "I'm saying it's a very suspicious coincidence," Lena replied carefully. "And Grace was fine this afternoon." Before Grant could respond, Dr. Wilson hurried in, medical bag in hand. After a quick examination of the mare and the syringe, his expression was grave. "This looks like premature labor induction," he said grimly. "If I hadn't gotten here quickly, we could have lost both mare and foal." "Can you counteract it?" Grant asked urgently. "I'm already administering the medication," Dr. Wilson assured him, inserting an IV into Grace's neck. "But we're not out of the woods. If the foal comes now, it will be several weeks premature." Grant's expression was one Lena had never seen before. A cold, controlled rage that reminded her that beneath his recent warmth he was still a powerful man accustomed to getting his way. "I need to make a call," he said, stepping away from the stall and pulling out his phone. Lena stayed with Grace, soothing the frightened mare, as Dr. Wilson worked to stabilize her condition. Through the open stall door she could hear fragments of Grant's conversation. Absolutely unacceptable. Proof it was her, restraining order if necessary. "No, this ends now." When he returned, his expression was marginally calmer. "Dr. Wilson, what can we do?" "We wait," the veterinarian replied. "The medication should stop the contractions, but Grace needs to be monitored continuously. If she goes into labor despite our efforts, we'll need to be ready for an emergency delivery." "I'll stay with her," Lena volunteered immediately. Grant's eyes met hers, filled with gratitude and something deeper. "We'll both stay." For the next 6 hours they kept vigil over Grace. Dr. Wilson came and went, checking her vital signs and adjusting medications. By 3 in the morning the immediate danger had passed, but the mare remained fragile. "She should be stable now," Dr. Wilson said, packing his bag as dawn approached. "But she'll need careful monitoring for the next few days." After he left, Lena and Grant sat side by side on a hay bale outside Grace's stall, exhausted but relieved. Without thinking, Lena rested her head on Grant's shoulder, her body finally succumbing to fatigue. His arm came around her, holding her close. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. "If you hadn't found her when you did, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time," Lena said softly. "Like with Star." "It's more than that," Grant insisted, shifting to look into her face. "You notice things others miss. You care in a way that makes you pay attention when something's wrong." In the soft light of early morning, with fatigue lowering their usual defenses, Lena found the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. "Do you think Vanessa really did this? And if she did, why?" Grant sighed heavily. "I don't have proof, but yes, I think she did. As for why, spite, most likely. She came to the house tonight while I was on the phone, overheard me telling Edward to back off, that I would never marry his daughter." He rubbed a hand over his face. "She didn't take it well." "That's disturbing," Lena said, thinking of the innocent animal who had nearly paid the price for human jealousy. "It's criminal," Grant corrected grimly. "And she'll be dealt with. I've already called my attorney and security team. She won't set foot on this property again." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the night's events settling around them. Finally, Grant spoke again, his voice softer. "This isn't how I planned our evening to go," he said with a rueful smile. "I had dinner prepared, wine, chilled. I was going to tell you something important." Lena's heart quickened. "What were you going to tell me?" Grant took her hand in his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a way that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. "That you've changed everything for me," he said simply. "Before you came into my life, I was focused on building something impressive, expanding what I already had. Success was measured in acres acquired and profits made." He lifted his gaze to meet hers, his blue eyes intent in the early morning light. "But you've reminded me why I started this in the first place. My love for the land, for the animals, the way it feels to work with your hands and heart together." Lena's breath caught at the naked honesty in his voice. "When I look at you, Lena Mitchell," Grant continued, "I see someone who understands what really matters, who cares for a struggling foal not because of its pedigree or potential value, but simply because it needs care, who turns down money that could solve her problems because it comes with strings attached to her. Integrity." He reached up to cup her cheek. "I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly, "and it terrifies me because I've never felt this way about anyone before." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Lena's heart felt too full suddenly, emotions she'd been trying to contain spilling over. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly on the words. And it terrifies me just as much. Grant's smile was like sunrise breaking over the horizon. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. It was a perfect moment, until the shrill ring of Lena's phone shattered the silence. She pulled, aback reluctantly checking the screen. "It's my neighbor, Joe," she said with a frown. "He wouldn't call this early unless—" As she answered, her expression changed from confusion to alarm. Grant watched her intently, sensing bad news. "I'll be right there," she said, ending the call and standing quickly. "There's a fire at my farm, the old barn. Joe's called the fire department, but it's spreading fast." Grant was already on his feet. "I'm coming with you, my truck's faster." They raced through the early morning light, the sun just beginning to peek over the horizon as Grant's truck ate up the miles to Lena's farm. From a distance, they could see smoke billowing into the sky, dark against the pale dawn. "Oh no," Lena breathed as they pulled into her driveway. The old barn was fully engulfed in flames, fire trucks already on scene with firefighters battling the blaze. More concerning was how close the fire was to the main house, her home, the place that held all her family memories. Grant's hand squeezed hers briefly before they jumped out of the truck and ran toward Joe, who was speaking with the fire chief. "What happened?" Lena asked, her voice tight with fear. "Don't know for sure," Joe said grimly. "I was out checking my fences and saw the flames. Called it in right away, but it was already pretty bad by the time I got here." "Was anyone hurt?" Grant asked. Joe shook his head. "Place was empty, thank God. But Lena, they're worried about the house. If the wind shifts—" The fire chief approached them, his expression serious. "Ms. Mitchell, we're doing everything we can, but you should prepare yourself. If we can't contain, this soon the house might be at risk." Lena nodded numbly, watching as the flames devoured the barn where generations of her family had stored hay, kept animals, and weathered winters. It wasn't used much anymore. She didn't have enough livestock to need it, but it was still a piece of her heritage. Grant's arm came around her shoulders, steady and supportive. "What can we do to help?" he asked the chief. "Stay back and let Gus work," the chief replied. "And maybe start thinking about what you'd want to save from the house just in case." The next few hours passed in a blur of smoke, shouting, and anxiety. Lena, with Grant's help, packed her truck with photo albums, her parents' wedding rings, the quilt her grandmother had made, and other irreplaceable mementos. The firefighters fought valiantly, and by mid-morning, they had managed to contain the blaze. The barn was a total loss, but miraculously the house had been spared. As the firefighters began packing up their equipment, the chief approached Lena with a serious expression. "Ms. Mitchell, we've found something you should see." He led her and Grant to the remains of the barn, where a small area had been cordoned off. "Our investigator found traces of accelerant. This fire was deliberately set." Lena stared at him in shock. "You mean someone burned down my barn on purpose?" "That's what the evidence suggests," the chief confirmed. "The police will want to talk to you. Can you think of anyone who might want to harm you or your property?" Grant's expression darkened beside her. "I might have some ideas about that." Later, sitting on her porch steps while police officers combed through the ruins of the barn, Lena felt numb with exhaustion and disbelief. Grant sat beside her, his presence the only thing keeping her grounded. "You think it was Vanessa," she said quietly, "or her father?" Grant's jaw tightened. "The timing is too convenient to be coincidence. First Grace at the ranch, now your barn. Both right after you rejected Blackwell's offer, and I told him I wouldn't cooperate with his plans. But arson?" Lena shook her head in disbelief. "That's so extreme. People like the Blackwells aren't used to hearing no," Grant said grimly. "And they have a history of playing hardball in business deals." A police officer approached them, notebook in hand. "Ms. Mitchell, we'd like to ask you a few questions about any conflicts or threats you might have experienced recently." Lena glanced at Grant, who nodded encouragingly. Together, they told the officer about Edward Blackwell's visit, his offer, Lena's rejection, and the subsequent incident with Grace at the ranch. "We can't prove anything yet," the officer cautioned, "but we'll certainly look into it. In the meantime, is there somewhere else you can stay, just to be safe?" Before Lena could answer, Grant spoke up. "She'll stay at my ranch. I have security there." The officer nodded. That sounds like a good idea, at least until we determine whether this was targeted or random. After the police left, Lena stood in her yard, looking at the smoldering remains of the barn and the house that had so narrowly escaped destruction. I can't just leave, she said, her voice breaking slightly. This is my home. If I go, who knows what might happen next? Grant turned her gently to face him, his hands warm on her shoulders. Lena, listen to me. This isn't about running away, it's about being smart. If the Blackwells are behind this, they're playing a dangerous game. I have security, cameras, and staff at the ranch. You'll be safer there. What about my farm? My animals? Joe already said he'd check on things twice a day, Grant reminded her. And I can send some of my hands over to help with repairs and security. It's just temporary until we figure this out. Lena looked up into his face, seeing the concern and determination in his eyes. You really think they'd try again? I don't know, Grant admitted. But I'm not willing to risk your safety to find out. The protectiveness in his voice touched something deep inside her. Despite her fierce independence, the events of the past 24 hours had shaken her. First Grace, now her barn. What might be next? Okay, she agreed finally, but just for a few days until the police investigate. Grant's relief was palpable. Thank you. We'll figure this out together, I promise. As they packed a bag for her stay at the ranch, Lena couldn't help but reflect on how quickly her life had changed. Just weeks ago, Grant Parker had been a distant figure she vaguely resented. Now, he was offering her protection, standing by her side through crisis, and declaring feelings she had only just admitted to herself. Ready? Grant asked as she zipped up her duffel bag. Lena looked around her bedroom one last time, then nodded. Ready. As they drove back to Parker Ranch, the sun high overhead now, Grant reached across the console to take her hand. I meant what I said earlier, he told her quietly, before all this chaos happened. I am falling in love with you, Lena Mitchell. Despite everything, the fire, the threats, the uncertainty, Lena felt a spark of happiness ignite within her. And I meant what I said too, she replied, squeezing his hand. Even if your timing for romance is terrible. Grant's laugh was warm and genuine, a brief moment of lightness in a day filled with darkness. I promise to work on that. Later that evening, after checking on Star and Grace, both doing well, Lena settled into one of the guest suites in Grant's house. It was larger than her entire first floor at home, with a plush king-sized bed and a bathroom featuring a tub she could almost swim in. She had just changed into pajamas when a soft knock came at her door. Grant stood there holding 2 mugs of steaming cocoa. Thought you might have trouble sleeping, he said. Mind some company? Lena accepted a mug gratefully. Not at all. They settled onto a small sofa near the windows, which offered a view of the moonlit pastures. For a while they sipped their cocoa in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Do you think they'll be able to prove it was the Blackwells? Lena finally asked. Grant sighed. Honestly? Probably not. People like that are careful. They hire others to do their dirty work with layers of separation to protect themselves. So they just get away with it. Threatening animals, burning down buildings. Not if I can help it, Grant said, his voice hard with determination. I may not be able to prove it in court, but I have my own ways of dealing with people like Edward Blackwell. Lena studied his profile in the dim light. What will you do? Make it clear that any further action against you or your property will have severe consequences, Grant said simply. Blackwell wants something from me, access to land for his development. That gives me leverage. I don't want you compromising your business because of me, Lena protested. Grant turned to her, his expression serious. Lena, some things are more important than business. You taught me that. The simple statement warmed her more than the cocoa ever could. Impulsively, she leaned forward and kissed him, soft and sweet. When she pulled back, Grant was smiling. What was that for? For being nothing like I thought you were, Lena admitted. For caring about things that matter. I have you to thank for reminding me what those things are, Grant said, setting aside his empty mug and taking her hand. When I bought this ranch, I had grand plans for making it the premier breeding operation in the state. I was focused on bloodlines and auction prices, not on the animals themselves. He gazed out at the darkened pastures. Then a stubborn farm girl found a foal in the woods and reminded me why I fell in love with horses in the first place. Lena smiled, touched by his words. Star changed things for both of us, I think. Star was just the beginning, Grant said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. You're the one who really changed everything. They talked late into the night, sharing pieces of their lives they'd never told anyone else. Grant's childhood on his grandfather's much smaller ranch, the pressure from his father to focus on business rather than animals, Lena's dreams of restoring her family farm to its former glory, her fears of losing the only home she'd ever known. When Lena finally fell asleep that night, it was with a strange mixture of fear and hope swirling in her heart. The threats against her property were real and frightening, but Grant's presence in her life felt like a shelter in the storm. The next morning, Lena woke to the sound of her phone ringing. It was the police chief. "Ms. Mitchell, we've completed our initial investigation," he said without preamble. "The fire was definitely arson, but we haven't been able to identify a suspect yet. We found tire tracks that match a high-end vehicle, but that's not enough for an arrest." "What about the Blackwells?" Lena asked. "Mr. Blackwell has provided an alibi for the time of the fire. He was at a business dinner with several witnesses. As for his daughter, we're still looking into her whereabouts." After ending the call, Lena found Grant in the kitchen, already, dressed and drinking coffee while reviewing some papers. "The police don't have enough evidence," she told him, pouring herself a cup. "Blackwell has an alibi." Grant nodded grimly. "I expected as much, but I made some calls of my own this morning. Edward Blackwell will be at the Cattlemen's Association lunch today. I intend to have a very direct conversation with him." "I want to come with you," Lena said immediately. Grant studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Actually, that might be even better. Let him see we're presenting a united front." The Cattlemen's Association lunch was held at the Grand Hotel in the center of town, a gathering of the county's most prosperous ranchers and farmers. Lena felt out of place among the polished boots and expensive hats, but Grant kept her close, his hand at the small of her back as they navigated the crowd. Edward Blackwell stood near the bar, surrounded by a group of admiring listeners. His smile faltered slightly when he spotted Grant and Lena approaching. "Parker," he greeted smoothly, recovering quickly. "And Miss Mitchell, what a surprise to see you here." "We need to talk," Grant said, his voice low but commanding. "Privately." Something in Grant's tone made Blackwell excuse himself from his companions. The three of them moved to a quiet corner of the room. "I understand congratulations might be in order," Blackwell said with false cheer. "My daughter mentioned you two have become close." "Cut the act, Edward," Grant said coldly. "We know what you've been doing." Blackwell's expression hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "First you tried to bribe Lena to stay away from me," Grant continued, keeping his voice low but intense. "When that fails, one of my valuable mares is mysteriously drugged, and then Lena's barn burns down. Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say?" "Are you accusing me of something, Parker?" Blackwell asked, his smile gone. "Now, because that sounds dangerously close to slander." "I'm not accusing," Grant replied. "I'm warning. Whatever game you're playing stops now." Blackwell's eyes narrowed. "I don't respond well to threats." "Neither do I," Grant said evenly. "So let me be clear. If anything else happens to Lena, her property or my animals, I will make it my personal mission to destroy your development plans in this county. I'll buy every parcel of land you need, donate it to conservation, and make sure your investors know exactly what kind of man they're dealing with." The color drained from Blackwell's face. "You wouldn't dare. The economic impact—" "Oh, try me," Grant interrupted. "Family means everything to me, Edward, and Lena is becoming my family." The simple declaration sent warmth spreading through Lena's chest. She stepped forward, meeting Blackwell's cold gaze. "Mr. Blackwell, I don't know for certain that you or Vanessa had anything to do with what happened, but I do know that real strength isn't about intimidation or destruction. It's about building something that lasts, something that matters." Blackwell looked between them, calculation clear in his eyes. After a long moment, he gave a slight nod. "Perhaps we've all been overzealous," he said carefully. I assure you, Ms. Mitchell, you won't have any further trouble from me or my family. I'll hold you to that, Grant said, his voice still hard. And Edward, the resort development is officially dead. I won't be selling my land, not now, not ever. As they walked away, Lena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Do you think he'll really back off? He will, Grant said confidently. Edward Blackwell is many things, but stupid isn't one of them. He knows I meant every word. Later, that afternoon as they returned to the ranch, Lena's phone rang again. This time it was Joe, her neighbor. You might want to come by the farm, he said, an odd note in his voice. There's someone here you should meet. Curious and slightly concerned, Lena and Grant drove to her farm. As they pulled into the driveway, Lena was surprised to see a large truck parked near the burned-out barn with several men unloading lumber. Joe approached as they got out of the car. This fella showed up about an hour ago, he explained, gesturing, to a middle-aged man in a construction helmet who was examining the remains of the barn. Says he's been hired to rebuild your barn, better than before. Confused, Lena approached the man. Excuse me, there must be some mistake. I didn't hire anyone to rebuild. The man consulted a clipboard. Are you Lena Mitchell? This is the Mitchell farm? Yes, but no mistake, ma'am. We've been contracted to rebuild your barn with some modernized features, but keeping the traditional look. All paid for in advance. By whom? Lena asked, though she was already suspecting the answer. She turned to look at Grant, who was watching with an innocent expression that didn't fool her for a second. The paperwork just says, a friend, the constructor replied, handing her a business card. But we're legitimate. You can check our references. We specialize in historic farm structures. After the man walked away to direct his crew, Lena confronted Grant. You did this, didn't you? Grant shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. I might have made a few calls. Grant, this is too much. A barn like that will cost a fraction of what you're worth to me, he interrupted gently. Lena, please let me do this. Not because you need help or charity, but because I care about you and this place matters to you. Lena looked at the activity already buzzing around the burned barn site, then back at Grant's earnest face. You're impossible to say no to, you. Know that? So I've been told, he grinned, pulling her into his arms, though you've done a remarkably good job of it so far. What do you mean? Well, you turned down my reward for Star, you initially. Refused the job offer, and you rejected Blackwell's bribe, Grant pointed out. You're actually quite skilled at saying no when it matters. Lena laughed, resting her head against his chest. Only when it goes against what I believe in. And what do you believe in, Lena Mitchell? Grant asked softly. She looked up at him, at this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and changed everything. I believe in honesty, hard work, caring for creatures who depend on us. She reached up to touch his face. And I'm starting to believe in second chances and new beginnings. Grant turned his head to kiss her palm. So am I, he murmured. So am I. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a new pattern. The contractors worked efficiently on Lena's barn, creating a structure that honored the original design while adding modern improvements. Lena divided her time between working with Star at Parker Ranch and overseeing the reconstruction. Though she had moved back to her own house once the immediate threat from the Blackwells seemed to pass, she found herself spending more and more evenings at Grant's home, sharing dinners, quiet conversations, and increasingly passionate kisses. Star continued to thrive under their joint care, growing stronger and more confident each day. Grace, recovered from her ordeal, was pregnant again, carefully monitored by Dr. Wilson and the ranch staff. One evening, as they sat on Grant's porch watching the sunset, Lena realized how completely her life had transformed in just a few short months. From the moment she'd found Star cold and abandoned in the woods, nothing had been the same. Penny for your thoughts, Grant said, noticing her contemplative expression. I was just thinking about how much has changed, Lena replied. If you had told me 6 months ago that I'd be sitting here with you, feeling the way I do now, I would have said you were crazy. Grant smiled, taking her hand. Life has a funny way of surprising us when we least expect it. It certainly does, Lena agreed, thinking of the storm that had brought Star into her life, and by extension, Grant. As darkness fell, Grant seemed to grow more serious, almost nervous, an unusual state for him. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about the future." "What about it?" Lena asked, curious about his sudden solemnity. Grant turned to face her fully. "Lena, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've changed how I see everything. My business, this ranch, even myself." Her heart began to beat faster at the intensity in his voice. "I know we come from different worlds," he continued, "but I think that's part of what makes us work so well together. You remind me of what's real and important, and maybe I can help you achieve the dreams you have for your farm." "Grant, what are you saying?" Lena asked. Though she felt she already knew, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I'm saying that I love you, Lena Mitchell, and I want to build a life with you, not just at my ranch or your farm, but together, creating something that honors both our histories and builds a new future." Opening the box, he revealed a beautiful ring with a central diamond flanked by smaller sapphires that matched his eyes. "Will you marry me?" he asked simply. Tears welled in Lena's eyes as emotions overwhelmed her. 6 months ago, she had been struggling alone, trying to save a farm that was slowly slipping away. Now, this man, this wonderful, complex man who had revealed himself to be so different from his reputation, was offering her a partnership of equals. "Yes," she whispered, then laughed through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Grant slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a deep, tender kiss, Lena felt a sense of rightness settle over her. From the worst storm of the season had come the greatest blessing of her life. First a foal who needed saving, then a love she had never expected to find. Sometimes, Lena thought as she melted into Grant's embrace, the most precious things come to us not when we're searching for them, but when we simply open our hearts to the unexpected gifts that life places in our path. And in that moment, under a sky full of stars, with the man she loved holding her close, Lena knew that whatever challenges might come their way, they would face them together, just as they had from the day she'd carried a tiny abandoned foal into her barn and into her heart. The news of Lena Mitchell and Grant Parker's engagement spread through Meadow Creek like wildfire. Some people expressed genuine happiness for the couple, while others whispered about the unlikely pairing of the struggling farm girl and the wealthy rancher. "Have you seen the way people look at us?" Lena asked Grant one afternoon as they walked hand in hand through the town's farmers' market. "Like we're some kind of circus attraction." Grant squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Let them look. They'll get used to it eventually." "And if they don't," Lena challenged, though her tone was light. "Then they can keep looking," Grant replied with a smile. "Because I'm not going anywhere." The certainty in his voice never failed to warm Lena's heart. Despite their different backgrounds, Grant had never once made her feel less than his equal. If anything, he seemed to value her practical farm knowledge and straightforward approach to problems, even more than his own business acumen. As they stopped at a vegetable stand, an elderly woman approached them, her lined face creased in a smile. "Lena Mitchell," she said warmly. "Your mother would be so proud to see you now." Lena recognized Mrs. Henderson, who had been her mother's friend for decades. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. That means a lot." The older woman turned her appraising gaze to Grant. "And you must be the young man who's captured our Lena's heart. I hear you're rebuilding her barn even better than before." "Yes, ma'am," Grant replied respectfully. Though Lena's the one overseeing most of the design decisions, Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. "That's as it should be. Mitchell women have always known their own minds." She patted Lena's hand. "Your mother told me once that the right person doesn't try to change you. They help you become more fully yourself. Seems like you might have found that." As they continued through the market, Lena reflected on Mrs. Henderson's words. It was true. Grant had never tried to change her or her farm into something they weren't. Instead, he'd offered support and resources while respecting her vision and connection to her heritage. "What are you thinking about?" Grant asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Just that we make a good team," Lena replied, smiling up at him, "even if we're an unlikely one." Back at Parker Ranch that afternoon, they found Star in the training ring with Brooke, who had been helping with his daily exercises. At 4 months old, The foal had grown into a handsome young horse, his legs still long and gangly, but his movement already showing promise. "There's our boy," Lena called as they approached the fence. Star's ears pricked forward at the sound of her voice, and he trotted over immediately, nickering a greeting. Grant produced a carrot from his pocket, which Star accepted with enthusiasm. "He's doing great with the basic commands," Brooke reported. "He's smart, picks things up faster than most foals his age." "Just like his mother," Grant said, a hint of sadness still in his voice whenever he mentioned Duchess. Though the pain of losing the mare had eased with time, Lena knew Grant still felt responsible in some way. He'd blamed himself for not finding her sooner after the storm, for not realizing how severely the dehydration had damaged her kidneys. "Duchess would be proud of him," Lena said softly, understanding what Grant needed to hear. "And she'd be grateful that he's so loved." Grant's arm slipped around her waist, pulling her close against his side. These moments of silent understanding had become a cornerstone of their relationship, the ability to sense what the other was feeling without words. "I was thinking," Grant said as they watched Star prance around the ring showing off for his audience, "we should start planning the wedding soon." "Are you in a hurry, Mr. Parker?" Lena teased, though the thought of becoming his wife sent a thrill through her. "To marry you, absolutely," he replied without hesitation. "But also I thought a fall wedding would be nice. The leaves changing, cooler weather. Fall is only a few months away," Lena pointed out. Grant looked down at her, suddenly serious. "Too soon. We can wait longer if you want." Lena considered it. She'd never been the type of woman who had dreamed of an elaborate wedding. What mattered to her was the commitment itself, not the ceremony surrounding it. "No," she decided. "Fall sounds perfect. Something small, though. Just close friends and family." The relief on Grant's face was evident. "That's exactly what I was thinking. Something intimate, meaningful." As they discussed potential dates and locations, Lena's thoughts drifted to her farm. The new barn was nearly complete, a beautiful structure that honored its predecessor, while incorporating modern improvements. Her house still needed work, though. The roof, the plumbing, the ancient heating system. "What about after?" she asked, suddenly. "After we're married, I mean, where will we live?" The question had been hovering at the edges of her mind for weeks. Grant's ranch was beautiful, comfortable, and much more practical than her small farmhouse. But the thought of leaving the only home she'd ever known created a hollow feeling in her chest. Grant seemed prepared for the question. "I've been thinking about that," he admitted, "and I have a proposal. What if we split our time, some nights at the ranch, some at your farm? We could make improvements to your house to make it more comfortable, but keep its character intact." The thoughtfulness of his suggestion touched Lena deeply. "You do that? Go back and forth instead of just staying at your beautiful house?" "Lena," Grant said, turning to face her fully, "that house is just a building. You're my home now, and I know how much your farm means to you. It's part of who you are, part of what I love about you." She stretched up on tiptoes to kiss him, not caring who might see. "Have I told you lately that you're not at all the cold-hearted businessman I thought you were?" Grant laughed against her lips. Not since yesterday, at least. That evening, as they sat on the porch of Lena's farmhouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Grant brought up another subject they had yet to discuss. "I had a meeting with my attorney today," he said, his tone carefully casual, "about some business restructuring." Lena nodded, accustomed now to Grant's occasional need to discuss ranch operations. Though she had no formal role in his business, he had increasingly sought her input on decisions, valuing her practical perspective. "I'm creating a new entity," he continued, "a conservation trust that will hold a significant portion of Parker. Ranch lands in perpetuity, ensuring they can never be developed." This caught Lena's attention. "That's a wonderful idea," she said sincerely. "Protecting the land for future generations." "I thought you'd approve," Grant smiled. "But there's more. I'd like to include your farm in the trust as well, if you're willing. It would ensure the land stays agricultural forever, regardless of who owns it." Lena sat up straighter, processing his words. "You want to put my farm in a trust? But it's not yours to as a wedding gift," Grant clarified quickly. "The farm would remain yours or ours once we're married, but with legal protections against future development. It would stay a working farm forever, maintaining your family's legacy. The magnitude of what he was offering slowly dawned on Lena. This wasn't about Grant taking control of her property. It was about him understanding what truly mattered to her and finding a way to protect it forever. "You would do that?" she asked softly. "Use your resources to protect my family's land?" "In a heartbeat," Grant confirmed. "Lena, I've seen how developers like Blackwell operate. They're patient, willing to wait generations for the right opportunity. This way, no matter what happens in the future, both Parker Ranch and the Mitchell farm will remain what they are now, places where the land is respected and animals are treated with dignity." Tears welled in Lena's eyes at the thought of her family's legacy secured for all time. It was a gift beyond price, one that showed just how deeply Grant understood her values and priorities. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd be honored to have the farm included in your trust." "Our trust," Grant corrected gently. "Everything I have will be yours too once we're married. I want us to be true partners, Lena, in life, in work, in everything." As the stars began to appear overhead, Lena nestled against Grant's shoulder, feeling a deep sense of peace. From the moment she'd found Star in the woods, her life had been transformed in ways she never could have imagined. What had begun as an act of simple kindness had led her to the love of her life, a man whose heart was far bigger and more generous than his reputation had suggested. The morning of their wedding dawned crisp and clear, the September air carrying just a hint of the autumn to come. Lena stood in her childhood bedroom, now freshly painted and updated, but still filled with memories, as Sarah helped her into her dress. "You look absolutely beautiful," Sarah said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Simple and elegant, just like you." The dress was indeed simple, a flowing ivory gown with delicate lace details at the neckline and hem. No elaborate train or veil, just a crown of wildflowers in Lena's hair, gathered that morning from the meadow, where she had once found a struggling foal. "I can't believe this is really happening," Lena admitted, smoothing the soft fabric with nervous hands. "A year ago, I was just trying to keep this farm from falling apart. Now I'm marrying Grant Parker." "Life has a funny way of surprising us," Sarah said, echoing Grant's words from months earlier. "But anyone who sees you two together knows it's right. You balance each other perfectly." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Joe, Lena's elderly neighbor who had agreed to walk her down the aisle in place of her father. "It's time, honey," he said, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw her. "Lord above, you look just like your mother on her wedding day." With Joe on one arm and Sarah following behind, Lena made her way to the newly restored barn, which had been transformed for the occasion. Fresh-cut flowers and twinkling lights adorned the space, while hay bales covered in white linens provided seating for the small gathering of friends and family. At the far end, standing beneath an arch of autumn foliage and wildflowers, waited Grant. His expression when he saw her walking toward him was one Lena knew she would remember for the rest of her life, a mixture of awe, joy, and a love so profound it seemed to illuminate him from within. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, with personal vows they had written themselves. When Grant spoke of finding not just a partner, but a compass in Lena, someone who had reminded him of his true north when he had begun to stray, there wasn't a dry eye in the barn. Lena, in turn, thanked Grant for seeing her as she truly was, and for loving not just her, but the heritage and values that had shaped her. "You've taught me that strength doesn't always look like standing alone," she said, her voice steady despite her emotions. "Sometimes it looks like joining hands and facing the future together." At the reception that followed, held in the open area between Lena's house and the barn, Star made a special appearance. Now 6 months old and growing rapidly, he wore a special halter decorated with flowers for the occasion, led by Brooke, who had helped train him. "We thought our guest of honor should make an appearance," Grant explained to the delighted guests. "After all, without this little guy, we might never have met." As the afternoon stretched into evening, Lena found herself taking a moment alone, watching the celebration from a quiet corner. Grant was chatting with Dr. Wilson, laughing at something the veterinarian had said. Sarah was dancing with one of Grant's ranch hands, while Martha, Grant's housekeeper, was deep in conversation with Mrs. Henderson. It was a perfect blending of their two worlds, the small farming community that had shaped Lena and the more affluent ranching circle that Grant moved in. Yet in this moment, those differences seemed insignificant compared to the values they shared: love of the land, respect for animals, and commitment to building something that would outlast them both. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Parker," Grant said, appearing at her side and slipping an arm around her waist. The new name sent a thrill through Lena. "Just thinking how lucky I am," she replied honestly, "and how sometimes the best things come from the worst storms." Grant followed her gaze to where Star was now grazing contentedly in a nearby paddock. "He's come a long way from that cold, weak foal you found in the woods." "We all have," Lena said softly. Later that night, after the last guests had departed, and the stars shone brightly overhead, Grant led Lena to the edge of their property. In the moonlight, the rolling fields stretched out before them, peaceful and timeless. "I have one more surprise for you," Grant said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Another one?" Lena laughed. "Grant, you've already given me more than I ever dreamed possible. This one's different," he assured her. "It's not something I bought or arranged. It's something I realized." Curious, Lena turned to face him fully. "What is it?" Grant took both her hands in his expression suddenly serious. "When I came to your farm that day to claim Star, I thought I was just retrieving valuable property. I had no idea I was actually starting a journey that would change everything. I thought I knew about what matters in life." He looked out over the land, then back to her. "For years, I measured success by what I owned, what I controlled. But you showed me that real wealth isn't about possessions, it's about connections. To the land, to animals, to people we love." Lena felt tears prickling at her eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. "Grant, let me finish," he said gently. "My surprise is this. I'm stepping back from the business side of things. I've hired a CEO to handle the corporate operations of Parker Enterprises so that I can focus on what really matters: this ranch, your farm, the Conservation Trust, and most importantly, building a life with you." The magnitude of his decision left Lena momentarily speechless. For a man like Grant, who had built his identity around business success, this represented a profound shift in priorities. "Are you sure about this?" she finally asked. "I never wanted you to give up part of who you are." "I'm not giving up anything," Grant assured her. "I'm choosing to focus on the parts of my life that bring real fulfillment. The business will still be there, still be successful. I'm just not going to let it consume me anymore." He pulled her close, his arms strong and secure around her. "Because I've found something far more valuable to invest my time in: our future together." In that moment, as moonlight bathed the fields where generations of Mitchells had worked the land, Lena felt a sense of completion she had never known before. The struggling farm girl and the wealthy rancher had found in each other not just love, but a shared vision of what truly mattered. "I love you, Grant Parker," she whispered against his chest. "And I love you, Lena Parker," he replied, his voice rich with emotion. "More than I ever thought possible." 6 months later, the spring morning dawned bright and clear, the air filled with the scent of new growth and possibility. Lena stood at the fence of the training ring, watching as Grant worked with Star, now a handsome yearling showing great promise. "That's it, steady now," Grant called as Star trotted in a perfect circle, responding to the subtle cues of the long lead line. Lena smiled, remembering the tiny, trembling foal she had carried from the woods over a year ago. From those fragile beginnings, Star had grown into a confident young horse with a gentle temperament and natural athletic ability that marked him as special. "He's going to be amazing," she called to Grant, who nodded in agreement. "Just like his mother," he replied, a note of remembered sadness in his voice, though the sharp pain of Duchess's loss had eased with time. As Grant finished the training session, Lena's hand drifted to her slightly rounded belly, still barely noticeable beneath her loose shirt. They had agreed to wait to share their news until she reached the second trimester, but that milestone had passed last week. Tonight, they would tell their closest friends that the Parker Mitchell family was growing. "What are you smiling about?" Grant asked as he joined her at the fence, Star following behind him like a loyal dog. "Just thinking about how much has changed." "Since that storm," Lena replied. "I found a foal, fell in love with the last man I ever expected to, and now—" She placed his hand over hers on her stomach. Grant's face lit up with the joy that still appeared whenever he thought of their coming child. "Life has a way of giving us exactly what we need, even when we don't know we need it," he said, kissing her softly. Star nudged them impatiently, clearly expecting the treats that usually followed a training session. Laughing, Lena produced an apple from her pocket, which the young horse accepted with gentlemanly delicacy. "He remembers where he came from," Grant observed. "Even with all his training, he's still that foal you rescued." "We all remember where we come from," Lena agreed. "That's what makes us who we are." Together, they led Star back to his pasture, walking hand in hand through the property that represented the perfect blending of their separate worlds. Parker Ranch remained a premier breeding operation, but now with a focus on ethical practices and conservation that reflected their shared values. The Mitchell farm had been restored to productive use, with improved facilities, but the same heart and soul it had always possessed. And at the center of it all was the bond that had formed between a struggling farm girl and a wealthy rancher, a connection that had begun with an abandoned foal, but had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. As they reached the top of the hill overlooking both properties, Lena paused to take in the view. The morning sun illuminated the rolling pastures, the sturdy barns, and the comfortable houses that were now equally home to both of them. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if that storm hadn't happened?" she asked. "If I hadn't found Star that day?" Grant considered the question seriously. "I think we would have found each other eventually," he said finally. "Some things are just meant to be." Lena smiled up at her husband, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought them together. "Maybe you're right," she agreed, "but I'm glad it happened the way it did, every step of it." "Even the difficult parts?" Grant asked, thinking of the threats from the Blackwells, the fire at the barn, the loss of Duchess. "Even those," Lena confirmed, "because they showed us what we were fighting for and how strong we could be together." As they stood there, arms around each other, looking out over the land they both loved, Lena felt the gentle movement of their child within her, a new life that represented all they had built together and all that was yet to come. From a cold, frightened foal to a love that had transformed both their lives, their story had unfolded in ways neither could have predicted. And now, as spring brought renewal to the land around them, they faced the future with the same courage, commitment, and compassion that had drawn them together in the first place. "I love you, Lena Parker," Grant said softly, his hand resting protectively over hers on her growing belly. "And I love you, Grant Parker," she replied, leaning into his strength. "Always and forever." In that moment, as birds sang in the trees and Star galloped freely in the pasture below, Lena knew with absolute certainty that some storms, despite their fury, bring not destruction, but gifts beyond measure. And sometimes the most precious of those gifts come in the form of a struggling foal who needs nothing more than love, patience, and a caring heart to guide it home. The end.